Well, it is story time once again. So, Brian, get your book and come and sit in the living room on the comfortable couch and get ready to read with me. Tonight, let's pick the story A Fly Went By. Would you like to read that story? Would you like to hear that story? Well, get the book, then be settled on the couch, and get ready to turn the pages as I tell you to, and we'll begin together. Do you have the book? And are you comfortable? All right, then we may begin. If you'll open the book and turn to the title page where you have a little boy stretched out on the grass watching a fly who has just gone by, the title there is A Fly Went By. Turn the page again and we're ready to begin the story. This is the page in which the little boy is sitting inside the boat. The boat isn't in the water, however. It's up on the dry land. And at any rate, he is watching the fly going by again. So I'll begin the story, and I'll tell you every time I want you to turn a page. All right? Let's begin. I sat by the lake. I looked at the sky, and as I looked, a fly went by. Turn the page. A fly went by. He said, "Oh dear." I saw him shake. He shook with fear. And when I saw that fly go past, I asked him why he went so fast. I asked him why he shook with fear. I asked him why. He said, "Oh dear." He said, "I must get out of here." Turn the page now. The fly said, "Look, and you will see that frog. That frog is after me." The fly went past. The frog came fast. Turn the page. I asked the frog. I asked him, "Why? Why do you want to get that fly?" The frog said, "Me? I want no fly, but I must hop, and this is why." Turn the page. That cat, he said, just look and see. That cat, he said, is after me." Turn the page. Then he was gone with one big hop. The cat ran up, and I said, "Stop!" "Now stop, stop, stop," I told the cat. "Do not pick on the frog like that." Turn the page. The cat said, "Meow, meow, meow. Look, I want no frog. I have to get away from dog." Now turn the page, and there you will see the dog chasing the cat and knocking the little boy over in their haste. Turn the page again. So the fly ran away in fear of the frog, who ran from the cat, who ran from the dog. One ran from the other ran too, from one who came after. Now what could I do? Turn the page. Away past the lake, away went the fly and the frog. Away past the lake ran the cat and the dog. They went past a shed, and they went up a hill. I ran, and I said, "I will stop them, I will." The fly does not know that the frog is not mad. The frog does not know that the cat is not bad. The cat runs in fear of the dog, I can tell. If I can stop him, then all will be well, I think. Turn the page. I ran a lot. I ran so fast. I came up to the dog at last. "Now stop," I said. "You are the one who did all this. Why do you run? Why do you want to bite that cat?" "Oh, you are bad to be like that." The dog said, "No, ruff, ruff, no, that is not so. I want no cat. The cat can go. I do not want to bite the cat. I want to get away from that." Turn the page and we'll see what that is. "That pig," the dog said. "That pig," he said. "Look back and see. She likes to bite and she wants me." Now, who ever heard of a biting pig? Well, perhaps we'll see one this time. Just turn the page and we'll see. So the fly ran away in fear of the frog, who ran from the cat, who ran from the dog. The dog ran away in fear of the pig. My, she was mad, and was she big. Oink, 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 oink. Turn the page. I said to the pig, "So you are the one in back of all this. Now, why do you run?" "Why should a pig bite a dog?" I said. "And why are you mad? Are you out of your head?" The pig said, "Oink, oink, oink. I am not out of my head. See what is after me. Look," she said. Turn the page and we'll find out what was after her. "That cow will hit me," said the pig. "Those things up on her head are big." So the pig ran past. She ran past fast. Then the cow ran up, and a little cow too. I said, "Now what got into you? Do not pick on the pig, you two." Turn the page. The cow said, "Pig? Pig? The pig can go. That is not why we run. Oh, no. But someone bad has made us run. He wants to kill my little one." I asked the cow, "Who wants to kill your little one?" "Why, no one will." Turn the page. The cow said, "Well, look, up on the hill. The fox is there. He comes to kill." The cow and little cow ran past. All full of fear, they ran past fast. Turn the page. So the fly ran away in fear of the frog, who ran from the cat, who ran from the dog. The dog ran away from the pig, and now the pig ran away in fear of the cow. They came to the woods, and there was a tent, but they did not stop. In and out they all went. At last came the fox, so he was the one who made them all fear and made them all run. Yes, he was the one who was bad, I could tell. If I could stop him, then all would be well. Turn the page. I told the fox, "Oh, shame on you. Oh, shame, shame, shame for what you do. You want to kill the little cow. You stop, or I will whip you now." The fox said, "Now what did I do? Why do you say, 'Oh, shame on you'? I tell you I would never kill that little cow. I never will." Turn the page. The fox said, "This is why I ran. Back in the woods I saw a man. I saw a man, and he had a gun, and he wants to get me. Let me run," as he jumped into the little boy's arms and then climbed to get out again. Turn the page. So the fly ran away in fear of the frog, who ran from the cat, who ran from the dog and the pig and the cows. They all ran. Then came the fox, who ran from the man. They came to a house and went down the hall, and when they went out there was a big wall, but that did not stop them. Oh, no, not at all. They ran right through the wall, didn't they? Turn the page. They ran and they ran. They came to a town. They went up one way, and then they went down. They went up one way, and then down another. They ran and they ran, one after the other. And they came to a bank, but they did not stop. They went in the bank with a jump and a hop. With a jump and a hop they ran in, and then they went out the back way and ran on again. Turn the page. I ran as fast as I could run. I told the man, "You are the one in back of this. You are the one who wants the fox. Put down your gun." "Fox, fox," the man said. "No, I saw no fox, but I must go." for you should see, yes, you should see, the thing that now is after me. Turn the page. I did not see it, said the man. I took my gun, and then I ran, for I could hear it, a bump and thump. It was so big and bad it made me jump. It was so bad it made me fear. It was so big, it was so near. It must be 10 feet tall, he said, and big and fat and bad and red. Why, it can bite and kick and kill, and it will do it. Yes, it will. I hear it now. Come on, I say, for I must run and get away. Bump, thump was the sound we could hear, but we can't see anything yet. Let's turn the page. The man ran fast. Fast, fast, fast. What did I hear? A bump and a thump. It was so bad it made me jump. I was about to run away, but then I saw the thing, and say, it was not tall, it was not mad, it was not big, it was not bad. Was this the thing that made them run and made them fear? Was this the one? We still can't see it, but let's turn the page. It was a little sheep, so tame it came to me, and it was lame. I saw what made the bump and thump. I saw the thing that made me jump. The sheep said, "Look at this tin can. I cannot get it off." I ran. I ran for help. I saw a man. I went to him, but then he ran. Why did he run away from me? I just want help, as you can see. I said, "I will get help for you, and I can help the others too, for now I know just what to do." Turn the page. "Oh, man," I called, "come back. Come here. This is a sheep, so have no fear. The sheep wants help, for it is lame. Come back. Come here." And then he came. Turn the page. But still the others ran and ran. They did not know about the can. I had to call so they would hear. I had to tell them not to fear. I had to tell them all was well, and so I gave a great big yell. Turn the page and we'll see if it worked. "Stop!" he yelled. And they all came to a screeching, grinding stop, one piling up on the other because they stopped so fast, and finally the fox, slamming his face right into the back of the cow. Turn the page. I said to them all, "You must not run away. No one is after you. No one, I say. You all ran away, and now I know why. I sat by the lake, and there came a fly. The fly ran away in fear of the frog, who ran from the cat, who ran from the dog. The dog ran away in fear of the pig, who ran from the cow. She was so big. The cow ran away from the fox, who ran as fast as he could in fear of the man. That man heard a thump, and away he ran. It was just a sheep with a little old tin can." Turn the page. I looked at them all, and then I could tell they all had no fear, and now was all was well. They all went away, they all waved goodbye, so I sat by the lake and looked at the sky, and it was red and lovely, and I was tired from all that running, and so I just sat there, and soon I think I fell asleep. And that's the end of the story. Did you like the story, Brian? Well, we can listen to other stories too, but I think for tonight this is all. Tomorrow night we'll hear another story. Good night. Brian, you're listening to some music about a swan. This is called The Swan of Tuonela, music written by Jan Sibelius. Tonight I think we'd like to read a story about a swan, wouldn't you? It's the story of the Swans of Ballycastle. If you'd hand me the book, Brian, why, we could begin. Would you like to walk over here, stand by my chair while I read? This is the story of the Swans of Ballycastle. In the Irish seaside town of Ballycastle, the people still tell the story of the three wandering swans. Everyone in this region knows it well, from the townspeople to the fishermen to the farmers. Today, the town looks much as it did hundreds of years ago. There is one main street that starts in the country and ends by the sea, and off this main street are perhaps 6 smaller streets, some of them nothing but lanes that wander up and down hill as if they had no place to go. At the far end of the town is a little harbor with a breakwater that protects the fishing boats from the stormings of the Irish Sea. And here is a picture, if you turn the page, of the town of Ballycastle. And you can see the castle itself, the 2 small rivers, the houses with thatched roofs, the small harbor with fishing boats in, and their sails furled.
See, there's the castle.
Yes. And out there are the islands. Well, I'll go on reading. 2 small rivers, the Kerry and the Shesk, twist their way through Ballycastle, past the whitewashed cottages with thatched roofs, finally emptying into the harbor. On the outskirts, where the green meadow land gradually becomes hills, then mountains, is a tower, and beyond that, a castle. From this country of hills and mountains, on a day filled with sun, it is possible to see the island of Rathlin, which stands between Ireland and nearby Scotland. This is Ballycastle, the scene of the legend of the wandering swans. There were 3 of them, a sister and 2 brothers, only they actually weren't swans, but human beings. Deirdre, the oldest, was 10, Kevin was 8, and Michael was only 5. Their father's name was Brian, and he kept a small shop in the center of Ballycastle. The 3 children and their father lived on the 2nd floor over the shop. Their mother had died when Michael was very young. Brian, the father, raised the children as best he could. He wasn't unkind, nor did he purposely neglect them, but he was busy with his store, which sold a bit of almost everything. Here a housewife could buy eggs, meat, or a bolt of wool for a dress. Her husband could buy a plow to break his ground and seed with which to plant it, and a fisherman could buy hooks, sinkers, line, and sailcloth. For Deirdre, Kevin, and Michael, it was something of a magic shop. On days when the rain slashed in from the sea and stormed down from the mountains, they used the store as a place to play. No matter what their game, housekeeper, farmer, fisherman, knight, or lady, in their father's shop they found things to make the game more realistic. Brian, busy with his customers, did not mind. He stepped over them and around them. Once in a while he took from them an object he needed for a customer. The loss didn't bother the children, for simply by going to a counter or by reaching up to a shelf, they found another item just as interesting. When the weather was good, the 3 children would wander along the lanes. Deirdre, the oldest, walked in the middle, holding young Michael by the hand. Michael sometimes wasn't too happy at this. "Why must you hold my hand?" he demanded. "I want to run like Kevin." "Kevin is 8, while you are only 5, Deirdre always answered. "You must let me look after you just as if I were your mother." "I'll be glad when I grow up," he grumbled. The place where the 3 children liked best to play was on the beach by the harbor. This was long, wide, and curving. They used the far corner, close by a small stone breakwater, where the water was calm and shallow, and the white sand just right for building castles. When they became tired of playing, they would scramble to the top of the breakwater and gaze out to sea. Straight ahead, they would try to make out the small dot that was the island of Rathlin. There is another island, a smaller one, on the far side of Rathlin, Deirdre told them. "It's not possible to see it from here." "How do you know it actually is there?" Kevin asked. "Because I have heard the fishermen speak of it. It's a small island, they say, scarcely bigger than the meadow back of our home. Most of it is covered with trees." "Does anyone live on it?" Michael asked. "The fishermen say no. Do you suppose someday we may visit it?" Kevin wondered. "Someday we may," his sister answered. It was at this time that their father told them he was going to journey to Belfast to buy some goods for his shop. The news came to us as no surprise, for several times a year he made such a trip. "If I remain away a bit longer than usual, have no fear," he said. "I have arranged for the widow McConnell to run the shop and at the same time care for you." "That isn't necessary, Father," Deirdre replied, "for I'm quite old enough to look after the 3 of us." And one of these days, the three of us will be old enough to tend the shop for you, Kevin said. Well, maybe that won't be necessary, Brian, their father said slowly, a thoughtful look coming over his face. He left early the next morning, long before the sun removed from the mountains their night covering of purple. In his absence, Widow McConnell ran the shop and looked after the children. Not that she had much to do on that score, for Deirdre, as usual, took care of her young brothers. She cooked, served the meals, swept and dusted, and saw that her brothers went to bed on time. You're a smart girl and a good one, the Widow McConnell said to her. In another few years, you'll be able to run your father's home and shop with no one to help you. Each night after supper, just before the sun slid over the edge of the distant mountains, the children would take a last look up the road leading to Belfast. They hoped to see their father driving his small cart and horse down the road toward home. He's staying away longer this time, Kevin said to his sister. Is there anything wrong, do you suppose? Of course not. He's busy with his trading. Shortly after this, one morning the children rose and went downstairs. In the kitchen they found their father. With him was a strange woman. She was tall and thin and did not smile. I arrived home very early this morning, their father said. You were still asleep. He nodded toward the strange woman and said to the children, This is your new mother. The three children looked toward the strange woman, who stared back unsmilingly. I was married while I was in Belfast, their father continued. From now on, she'll look after you. But our real mother's gone away, Michael piped. I'm your mother now, the woman said in a sharp voice. As soon as the children's father had left, she turned to them and stated, Every day I'll have jobs for each of you. You're to do them well, or you'll be punished. Father's never punished us, Deirdre said. He's had no need to, for all of us mind very well. We'll see about that. Now you, Deirdre, scrub the floor. You two boys carry in the logs for the fire. Please, but can't Michael do something easier? Deirdre asked. Those logs are awfully heavy for such a little fellow. You heard my orders, the woman snapped. Obey them. That night, while in bed, the children talked about this woman from Belfast whom their father had married. Michael, exhausted from his unaccustomed heavy work, fell asleep murmuring, I don't think I like her very much. The others lay awake. She shoved me, Kevin whispered, and said I wasn't working hard enough. Why did father have to marry her? His sister tried to assure them that their stepmother was not as bad as she seemed, and that all of them would get to like her. Long after Kevin had joined Michael in sleep, Deirdre stared out the window, watching the full moon ride higher and higher in the sky. No, she wasn't certain that she liked her stepmother, she told herself, but she must make every effort to do so. In the days that followed, there were many changes in the once happy home and shop in Ballycastle. No longer were the children allowed to play on the floor of their father's store, nor could they touch the goods on the counters and shelves. No longer did they spend long and happy hours playing on the tiny protected beach. Their lives became work and no play. When the widow McConnell from her next door tried to suggest to the new mistress that perhaps she was too stern with the children, she was told to mind her own affairs, and so the kind widow never again set foot in the shop. Brian, the easy-going father, now that the children had a stepmother, paid even less attention to them. He was too busy, for his wife had told him that the way to become rich was to load his cart with goods and peddle them over the countryside to the people. And these trips meant that often several days went by without Deirdre and Kevin and Michael seeing him. By this time the stepmother, now sure of her position in the house and shop, thought nothing of punishing the children for wrongs she fancied they had done. Being a woman of short temper, many times she slapped them, and on other occasions, in a fit of rage, she would pack them off to bed with no supper. One afternoon, Deirdre discovered her brothers in the garret. They were staring out of the tiny window, trying to see the little island that lay on the other side of Rathlin, they told her. But don't you know you can't see it, even when the day is clear, she asked. I wish we could go there, all three of us, for good, Kevin said. Don't make such a strong wish, or it may come true, Deirdre warned him. I wish it would, he answered. Then we'd be away from our stepmother and we'd be happy, just as we used to be. On one of their father's frequent trips through the countryside, a storm lashed in from the sea. Sweeping in over the harbor, it topped the stone breakwater and burst upon the town. The heavy rain and high waves threatened to flood the main street and lanes. Thunder and lightning roared on the heels of the gale. The storm was so ferocious that the bell in the nearby church tower broke from the iron support and went crashing to the street below. The children's stepmother was terrified and fled to her room, drawing the shutters in order to close out the cannon-like roaring of thunder and the howling of the wind. Meanwhile, Deirdre and her two brothers tried to put up the shutters on the shop windows, but the wind whisked the boards from their hands, and off they sailed like big pieces of flat paper. The sea, bursting over the beach, began to pour up the main street. The three children worked to shut the heavy door, but the wind was too strong, and then the water, rolling faster and faster, swept into the open shop, forcing them to retreat up the stairs. The invading sea-water soaked the boats of cotton, silk, and wool cloth, and ruined the seed, flour, meat, root, fruit, and vegetables. The next morning, Deirdre, Kevin, and Michael were awakened by a bird singing outside the window. They jumped up from bed and looked out. The rain and wind had stopped, and there was the brightest sun they had ever seen. When they went downstairs and entered the shop, what a sight met their eyes! The entire contents of the room were on the floor, soaked through and through with rain and sea-water. In the middle of the floor stood their stepmother, mumbling to herself about the damage. Only she didn't refer to it as my husband's goods. Instead, she was saying, "All my lovely goods ruined, what a loss to me." As soon as she caught sight of the children, she advanced toward them, her eyes blazing like a pair of small fires. "And 'tis all the fault of you three," she snapped. "Why did you not put up the shutters and close the door?" "We tried, but we weren't strong enough," Deirdre answered. "If you had helped us, we might have saved the goods. I'll tell your father it was all your fault." "We'll tell him the truth," Deirdre said, "for it's time you stopped blaming us for things we did not do." "Get out of here," the stepmother stormed. With that, she chased them into the littered street. "I've hated you from the moment I set eyes on you," she screamed, "and I hope never to see you again." "It's almost a curse you're drawing upon us," Deirdre said. "If it isn't, I'll make it one," the stepmother screeched. "I'll send you three away from here." She pointed to the bell that now lay shattered on the ground. "May you not return until the sound of that bell, restored to the belfry, reaches your ears." The speechless children wandered down the street. They went past the harbor road and along the meadows, following the winding course of the Carry River. A long time later they dropped to the low-lying river bank, tired from their walk. It was peaceful and quiet. The only sound came from a brown trout leaping out of the water. Downstream the children saw a pair of white swans floating along the river's surface. "If only we could go to the little island that lies beyond Rathlin," Kevin said wistfully. "But how could we ever travel there?" Deirdre asked. Michael suddenly pointed to the swans downriver. "If we were like those swans, we could swim to the island," he said excitedly. "That's what I'd like us to be. Beautiful white swans living on the little island we've never seen." "So do I," Deirdre cried. "Then we'd be happy." While saying this, she looked into the clear water of the river, and what she saw made her start. The reflection that stared up at her was that of a swan, not a little girl. Quickly she looked at herself and her two brothers. She had become a white swan, and so had they. They were smaller than human beings, but Kevin was still bigger than Michael, and Deirdre was bigger than both. "Look, I'm a swan," Kevin cried, "and I have wings instead of hands, and my feet are webbed." "Now we can fly," Michael said excitedly, flapping his wide, white wings, and as he did so he fell into the river, where he swam in tight little circles, like a sailboat without a rudder. The other two immediately slid into the water and chugged around, testing the newly found skill. Kevin and Michael then looked to their sister for guidance, as they had always done. "It's going to be a long trip to our new home," she said. "I will lead the way." They paddled down the river, past the green meadowland, and into the tiny harbor of Ballycastle, like a small white fleet of ships. They changed their course and churned straight out into the sea toward the distant island of Rathlin. The water was calm, and there was only a slight wind. By the time night had closed in, Deirdre signaled for a stop, and the three children, now swans, floated silently on the water. Early the next day they paddled on. Late morning the three children sailed past the island of Rathlin, which seemed to float on top of the water like a gray-black whale. As they skirted Rathlin, they suddenly saw stretched out before them another island. Only this one was small and green, and was covered with trees of all sizes and shapes. Its edge was broken by tiny bays, just as though someone had taken a large pair of scissors and cut out pieces of the land. "Do you think this is our island?" Kevin asked anxiously. I do hope so, Michael complained, for my feet are tired from paddling, and it's hungry I am. I had no supper last night. They swam closer, and just before they were ready to go into what appeared to be the main harbor, a swan, the largest one they had ever seen, paddled over to them. The children waited, not knowing what to expect. Indeed, they were a bit frightened. Suddenly the strange swan called out to them in a deep voice, "Welcome, welcome to the happy island where time stands still." "Good morning, sir," Deirdre faltered. "And the top of the morning to you, Deirdre." "You know my name?" she asked, surprised. "Indeed I do," the swan replied, and behind you is Kevin, and bringing up the rear is little Michael. Welcome, one and all." Then he continued, "Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Rory." "But, Mr. Rory, how do you know our names?" Deirdre asked. "Because word was sent to me yesterday that you would be on your way," came the reply. "And how is it, Mr. Rory, that you can speak just like a real person?" Kevin asked. "Because I was once a real person, as you put it, a grown man." "Have you lived here very long?" asked Deirdre. "Over 100 years," the swan answered. "Indeed, you must be very old," Michael commented. "Actually, I'm only 28 years old," Rory replied. The children were too astonished to speak. Then Rory told them the story of the happy island where time stands still. The island was especially reserved for people who, in the outside world, had led unhappy lives through no fault of their own. The people who lived here, like the four of them, had also been changed into white swans. For himself, Rory explained, when a young boy he had been forced to learn the shoemaker's trade, when actually he had always wanted to be a minstrel lad. No one was unhappy on the island, Rory explained, and no one ever grew old, but always remained the same age he had been when he had become a swan. Everyone worked to keep the island neat and clean. However, only those who deserved it were admitted. "Suppose a person wants to leave here," Deirdre asked. "Can he do so?" "Certainly," Rory said, "only no one has ever wanted to leave." When they landed on the island, Rory introduced the newcomers to the other swans who had been waiting patiently to meet them. After a few days, Deirdre and her brother settled down to life in the new home. Rory showed each how to build a nest of twigs, branches, leaves, and grass. The children located their soft beds within a small cluster of trees. During the days, Deirdre, Kevin, and Michael, like the other swans, gathered food and did their share of work to keep the island tidy. Once a week they attended the meeting of all the swans, which was conducted by Rory. It was at these gatherings that rules were discussed and voted upon, and where suggestions and complaints were given a careful hearing. Actually, there were very few grievances, for the swans were a happy group. Everyone did his job gladly. Although time passed, none of the swans realized it, including Deirdre, Kevin, and Michael. There were no clocks to tick away the minutes and hours, and no calendars to show the passing of days, weeks, months, and years. Aside from an occasional newcomer, there were no visitors. When a fishing boat attempted to enter one of the small bays, as if by magic, the rudder would twist out of the helmsman's hand, and the boat would sail off into the distance. On one warm summer afternoon, the three children climbed the small knoll in the center of the island in the search for food. Soon a wind sprang up, and riding on its heels was a faint but persistent sound. Deirdre stopped in her tracks and listened. The sound stopped. Then it began again, this time louder. "Listen," she called to her brothers. "Listen to the sound." "'Tis nothing but the wind," Kevin said. "It's that and something more. Do listen carefully," she begged. Can you hear the sound of the bell, Brian, in the music? This time the sound, rising over the top of the wind, was louder and clearer. They looked at each other in surprise. "It's a bell," Kevin whispered. "Yes, a bell," Deirdre said. "The bell from the church that stands near our old home." "But that can't be so," Michael interrupted. "During that fearful storm, was it not blown to the ground where it broke?" As the sound of the bell continued to reach them, they thought of the curse their stepmother had called down upon them. Her words came back. "May you not return until the sound of that bell restored to the belfry reaches your ears." "What are we to do?" Kevin asked. "It means we must return to Ballycastle," Deirdre said slowly. "But I don't want to go back," Michael complained. "We've never been so happy," Kevin added. "We have no choice but to return to Ballycastle," their sister explained. "The bell is telling us that the curse of our stepmother has been lifted and that we are free." That night Deirdre spoke to Rory and explained what had happened. He told her he too had heard the bell, and he knew what its ringing meant. Whether or not she and her brothers returned to Ballycastle, he explained, must be their choice. In the morning all the swans walked with Deirdre, Kevin, and Michael to the edge of the water. Although everyone tried to be cheerful, there was great sadness. Always remember you are free to return, Rory said. In fact, I will not actually say goodbye, for I am sure you will come back to us. And every day we will watch for you. Bon voyage, everyone cried, as the three swans swam away from the happy island where time stands still. Aided by a favoring wind, the children made fine time. However, it was very late at night when they landed at Ballycastle. They walked to the small protected beach where they had once built castles from sand. Exhausted, they fell into a dreamless sleep, lying close to one another to keep warm. Deirdre was awakened by the screeching gulls winging and dripping over the harbor. The waves were breaking against the beach and the morning sun was traveling higher in the sky. She stretched a bit, and as she tried to ruffle her feathers, she was so surprised that she could make no sound. In place of her feathers was skin. Her wings were now arms and hands, and her webbed feet had been replaced by legs and toes. Not only had she regained her human form, but she was dressed in exactly the same clothes she had worn before becoming a swan. She darted a look at her sleeping brothers. And they, too, were human beings again, and were dressed as they had been in the past. When she shook them from their sleep, their surprise was greater than her own. The most amazing thing was that none of them had changed. Michael was still 5 years old, Kevin was 8, and Deirdre was 10. They were talking among themselves when a voice was heard to say, "And what would you be doing sitting here on the beach so early in the morning?" They looked up. Standing over them was a big, pleasant-faced young man. He had a twinkle in his eye, a broad smile on his face, and his hair was as red as the brightest of sunsets. "Are you perhaps not lost?" he went on. "Certainly you are strangers to this village, for I live here, and never before have I seen you." "We're not exactly strangers to Ballycastle," Deirdre began. "Indeed we're not," Michael piped. "We live here." Before he could say anything else, his sister nudged him into silence. "We don't truly live here," Deirdre explained. "But we've been here before, quite some time ago, I would say." "Where are your parents?" the young man asked. "Our mother is dead, and we don't exactly know where our father is at the moment," Deirdre replied. "Could it be, then, that you're the children of wandering gypsies who have left you behind?" the young man asked. "No, our father owns a shop," Deirdre answered. "And have you no place to stay, no home to call your own?" He looked at them thoughtfully, then he grinned. "Now I'm asking too many questions, am I not?" Upon learning their names, he informed them that he was the local schoolmaster by the name of Shane McConnell, and that he lived alone. "Are you perhaps related to the widow McConnell?" asked Kevin. He shook his head. "I'm the only McConnell left in the village. Are you certain you're thinking of Ballycastle?" "Oh, very certain," Kevin said. "The widow McConnell lives on the main road across from the church." A look of wonderment passed quickly over the young schoolmaster's face. Then he said, "Well, while you are in Ballycastle, you must stay at my small cottage. And don't say no, for you can't sleep on the beach like 3 seagulls. Or swans," Michael added. Whistling a cheerful tune, Shane McConnell led them from the beach and along the main road of Ballycastle. With the exception of a few new houses and a few old ones that had been torn down, the village looked much the same as when the children had left it. If anything, it was the people who had changed. Deirdre, Kevin, and Michael did not recognize one familiar face. The villagers, they noticed, also wore a type of clothing different from that which the children remembered. A boy glanced up and, pointing a finger, yelled, "Now look at those 3 young ones, will you? Did you ever see such clothes? They must be from another land." A quick look from the schoolmaster made the village boy stop his hooting. "We are dressed differently from these children," Deirdre asked. "Ah, sure, don't let that bother you," the schoolmaster answered. "They don't know any better, never having traveled one step from Ballycastle." He stopped in front of a house. "This is my home," he said. It was the same house where the children's old friend, the widow McConnell, had lived. Without thinking, the children walked a few steps further until they stood outside their old home. It no longer was a shop that they could see. Instead, it was a home complete with furniture and pictures on the walls. 2 small children were playing on the floor, while their mother, seated in a chair, was sewing on some clothing. Three questions popped into each of their minds. What had happened to their father? Where was their stepmother? Why was the shop no longer a shop? Next they examined the church across the road. Their eyes went up and up to the belfry, and as they looked, the bell tolled the hour. Yes, the children thought, that surely was the same bell which had called them back to Ballycastle, the very bell that had shattered to the ground during the storm. "The bell has a sweet voice, don't you think?" asked the schoolmaster. "Only 2 days ago it was put back in the belfry. I was the one who discovered it, lying useless in a nearby shed." "The bell was broken in two," cried young Michael, dashed to the ground by the anger of the storm. As they were about to enter the house, a window in a cottage across the way flew open, and a woman poked her head out. "Good morning, Mr. McConnell. I see you have visitors." "Aye, I have, Mrs. McGinnis. They are friends from the south of the country." "Would I be knowing them?" she persisted, her voice full of curiosity. "The answer is no, Mrs. McGinnis." Mrs. McGinnis closed the conversation by slamming her window shut. And that night, exhausted from their busy day, the children crawled into a big feather bed in the house that had once sheltered the widow McConnell, their old friend. No sooner had Shane McConnell had said good night and disappeared down the small twisting staircase than Kevin and Michael fell sound asleep. Before Deirdre closed her eyes, one question kept going through her mind. Was the schoolmaster at all puzzled over the sudden appearance of his three young guests? The schoolmaster was at that moment asking himself the same thing. Seated in his wing chair before an open fire, Shane McConnell puffed on his clay pipe, and each puff of smoke, as it curled upward, seemed to be a cloudy question. Yes, indeed, he was most puzzled. Where had the children come from? They obviously knew their way around the village, for they had pointed out to him the lanes, the meadows, and the two rivers. They knew all about the old tower and the castle that sat on the nearby hill. However, it was most strange, the young schoolmaster thought, that the three children knew no one in the village. That afternoon they had passed some of the village people, and not a word of greeting had been spoken. The villagers had stared at them, and Deirdre, Kevin, and Michael had stared back. Then there was the subject of the bell. How had young Michael known it had been dashed to the ground, broken in two by the worst storm Ballycastle had ever experienced? "Well, 'tis surely a mystery," Shane said aloud, "and one I can't solve, at least not tonight." He tapped out the ashes in his pipe, put out the lamp, and went to bed. Before he fell asleep, he made a promise to himself to solve the puzzle. In the days of the green summer that followed, Shane, the schoolmaster, was able to spend much time with his young friends. He took them on walks, on picnics, and for rides by horse and cart through the countryside. Once he took them swimming in the harbor, and to his surprise, each of the children very easily outswam him, a skill they had picked up while they were swans. In fact, the swan habit was still so strong that young Michael insisted upon upending himself, sticking his head underwater, and looking for food in the bottom of the harbor. As the bright summer days winged by, the children spent more and more time with Shane. The village children obviously didn't like to play with Deirdre, Kevin, and Michael, and became strangely silent every time the three newcomers approached. When some of the parents asked Shane who his young guests were and where they came from, he was quite abrupt, saying they were friends who had come for a visit. One cool evening, while Shane and the three children were sitting before the open fire, he made a remark. "School will be starting very soon, and so you will become my students. That will be grand fun for all of us." The children didn't answer. Instead, they continued to stare into the dancing flames, their thoughts far away. The next morning he rode his horse down the road toward Belfast. In a deep glen he called upon Finn, the best storyteller in that entire section. Finn was old, so old he didn't exactly know his age, but he had a remarkable memory, and he knew the history and folk tales of the region as no other man. Shane spent a long time with old Finn, and when he mounted his horse and galloped along the road to Ballycastle, the long evening shadows had settled over the dark glen. The next night there was a hint of storm in the air. After the children had finished their supper, Shane said he had a story to tell, and so all four took their places in front of the fireplace. This story took place 200 years ago, Shane began, and it starts right here in Ballycastle. According to the tale, it seems there were 3 children. And then Shane told them the whole account of their own lives. He began with how happy they had been living with their father and how unhappy they had been after he had married their stepmother. He described the storm, the ruined shop, the broken church bell, and the curse the stepmother had placed upon them. He ended with how the 3, having changed into swans, had left Ballycastle to be seen no more. "We thought you would find out," Deirdre said. And now that you know who we are, perhaps you don't like us, Michael frowned. I like you better than before, Shane smiled, for I think that you must be rather lonely. You haven't told us what happened to our father and stepmother, Deirdre said. The schoolmaster related how their father, upon his return, had learned that his wife had been driven from the house, had driven the children from the house. Accordingly, he had sent her back to Belfast, away from his sight forever. He called down upon his own head the wrath of heaven for having been so neglectful a father. After a number of years, he had sold the shop and disappeared from Ballycastle. According to the story, years later, word reached the village that he had died. And all that took place 200 years ago, Shane said, which makes each of you a very old person. The children then told him about the happy island where time stands still, about Rory and the other people who live there in the form of swans. You do believe our story? Deirdre asked. And why would I not believe it? He questioned, smiling. Did you not return after 200 years? He looked into the flames of the fire. It must be a wonderful place, this island of yours. I should like to see it. Oh, but you can't, Kevin said, for it is only for people who have led unhappy lives, and you, Mr. Shane, you lead a very happy life. But what of you three? Shane asked. Will you remain here with me? When they didn't answer, he went on. The only way that you can turn into swans again is to have another storm take place at the same time of day, just as before. And with it the bell in our church must again be hurled to the ground and lie there broken. Only then, if the desire in you is strong enough, will you become white swans, free to return to your island. It was with this thought that he sent them off to bed. The wind, which howled through most of the night, came up to a protesting stop by the time the children finished their breakfast the next morning. Shane said that he had an errand to do at the village of Larne and would return by late afternoon. They stood on the road and waved goodbye to him as he galloped away. Shortly after this, the sky blackened. The placid water in the harbor turned into waves that grew bigger by the hour. When Deirdre saw the storm develop, she and her brothers closed the shutters in Shane's house and bolted the doors. Through a chink in one of the shutters, they watched as the water, pouring in from the harbor, began flooding the main street. At the very height of the storm, the children heard a grinding sound, followed by a heavy crash and a strange noise, as though caused by a protesting bell. No sooner had this happened than the storm ended. They unbolted the door and threw it open. The water was quickly retracing its course to the harbor. The sun was out, and the sky was clear. Deirdre pointed to the middle of the road. The church bell, ripped from the belfry, lay shattered on the ground. It's just as before, Michael whispered. We're free to return now, Deirdre said. What do you think they will do, Brian?
They'll go down to the river looking to turn to swans.
They want to go back to be swans instead of little boys and girls.
Right.
Without another word, the children walked down the street with Michael in the middle, his hand held tightly by his sister. They walked slowly but surely past the harbor and toward the winding Carry River. It was late afternoon when Shane returned from Larne. Forced to seek shelter from the storm for several hours, he galloped his horse for home as fast as the animal could travel. When he reached his house, he dashed inside. His voice echoed hollowly through the emptiness when he called out, Children, Deirdre, Kevin, Michael. He went from room to room, but there was no sign of them. Shane went out into the street, but stopped suddenly. It was then that he saw the broken church bell. Mounting his horse, he drummed down the road, past the harbor along the river bank, calling out to the children as he rode, but no answer came back. When he returned to the harbor, he had one of the local fishermen sail him out beyond the breakwater toward the island of Rathlin. The schoolmaster stood in the prow of the small boat, his eyes sweeping the sea. They sailed for several hours until suddenly the fisherman yelled to Shane. Pointing ahead, he passed Shane a spyglass. Shane clapped the glass to his eye. Far ahead, the rays of the late sun had opened a bright path over the water. Directly in its center, he could see 3 white swans swimming steadily forward, setting a course for just beyond the island of Rathlin. A sad look passed over his face, which was quickly replaced by a faint smile, then a wide grin. Do you see anything? The fisherman called out. Shane slowly put down the glass and turned to the fisherman. Bring her around and head for home, he said. I've found what I was searching for. And that is the end of the story of the Swans of Ballycastle, Brian. Brian, if you were listening very carefully, in the background you heard the music, which was supposed to represent the sounds of chicks as they tried to hatch out of their shells. And that's particularly appropriate tonight because I think we'll read the story tonight of how Fletcher was hatched.
Well,
And
when the chicks were hatched, that's what Fletcher did. But he was killed at the egg.
yes, that's right. Why don't you let me tell the story, and then you can do your guesswork later on. But the point of the story is that Alexandra, the little girl, suddenly preferred the company of small chicks to that of her pet dog, Fletcher. And this so disappointed Fletcher that he wanted to hatch out of an egg like a chick and so then be loved once again by Alexandra. If you'll pick up the book, Brian, How Fletcher Was Hatched, we'll begin and find out just exactly what happened. It's a very pretty book, and if you turn lift open the cover, at the ends of the book, you'll find, silhouetted against the moonlight, Fletcher's two friends, the otter and the beaver, at the bottom of a hill near the pond, and at the top of the hill there is the broken egg out of which Fletcher has hatched. If you'll turn the page, and yet one more page, you're at the title page, on which Fletcher and his two friends and some butterflies are dancing on top of the hill. Keep turning pages, one more, and then one more, and we're ready to begin the story. Alexandra sat in the sunlight watching a chick hatch from an egg. Beep! And it was out of its shell. Fletcher, she called to her dog, look at this dear chick. It's so tiny, it's so yellow, it's so fluffy. It's so stupid, growled Fletcher to himself. He gave Alexandra a hopeless look and walked to his water dish. It was empty. Another thing, he hadn't had his ears scratched in days. No one wants a first-rate hound dog around here, he thought to himself. She's probably forgotten me. Fletcher raised his head and howled miserably. And all of this is taking place, as you see by the pictures, Brian, just outside a small cottage. And Alexandra is playing with some newly hatched chicks. Mother Hen is running around nearby, very solicitously, that is, wondering what has happened to her chicks. And Fletcher looks very sorry indeed. Very sad. If you'll turn the page, we find that Alexandra is talking to Fletcher. Quiet, Noisy. The chicks are sleeping. Alexandra turned her back on Fletcher. With a wounded look, Fletcher shuffled mournfully away toward the park at the edge of town. At the far end of the park was a pond where Fletcher's faithful friends, Beaver and Otter, lived. Turn the page now, and we're at the pond where Fletcher is greeting, nose to nose, his friend the Otter. Otter was splashing Beaver at the water's edge when Fletcher shuffled up. The animals weren't long in noticing Fletcher's sadness. Fletcher saw to that with a few deep moans and some very loud sniffles. Alarmed, they gathered close to hear his tale. She's forgotten me, said Fletcher. She loves chickens. Cute, fluffy, peeping, stupid chickens. Beaver and Otter, who were wild, free animals, didn't really understand Fletcher's deep attachment to his mistress, Alexandra. But they understood that Fletcher was terribly unhappy. I'm terribly unhappy, said Fletcher. Maybe if you were fluffy and yellow, said Otter doubtfully. Could you peep a little? Asked Beaver. If you could only hatch once in a while, asked Otter. That's it, cried Beaver, slapping his tail. We'll have you hatch. It will be a new beginning. Me hatch? Yelped Fletcher. Turn the page, and we'll find out just what they're up to. But Beaver and Otter paid little attention to Fletcher. They were soon in a warm discussion of how to make an egg large enough to hold a hound dog. With some misgivings, Fletcher promised to do his part and act like a chicken. And if you look at the picture at the right-hand side of the page, that shows Fletcher reacting to what his friends have suggested. Who, me? You can just hear him saying as you look at this picture. He looks very surprised indeed, his ears straight up in the air, but bent over at the top. Turn the page and we'll find out how they progress in building this large, very large egg, an egg large enough to hold a hound dog. They built the egg around Fletcher. All day they worked in the sun with reeds, clay, and river grasses. Otter sometimes stopped to tickle Fletcher's nose with a cornflower, but Beaver, who was a master builder, worked steadily, plastering pink clay evenly over a reed network. And you notice there that Fletcher is crouched inside, looking as though he didn't quite trust what was going on. With his friends working so tirelessly, Fletcher couldn't complain even when wet lumps of clay dropped on his head. If you'll turn the page, we'll get a look at the finished egg itself. When it was finished, Beaver had smoothed the clay over the surface with such artistry that there could be little doubt that this great pink, pearly object was an egg that would have been a joy to any mother bird's heart. He speckled it brown in honor of Fletcher's own brown spots. 2 small holes were left in the egg so that Fletcher could be fed water, and a strawberry or 2. I don't know if dogs like strawberries, do you? Do you think dogs like strawberries, Brian?
Yeah, they sure do.
Well, Fletcher does anyway, doesn't he? And apparently, since the otter and the beaver both like strawberries, they just assumed that Fletcher would like strawberries too. If you turn the page, you'll find the work is still going on because Beaver, Otter, and Fletcher were tired, and it had been a long day's work. Shadows grew deeper and lengthened into the blue of night, and when the pumpkin-colored moon appeared on the rim of the pond, Beaver and Otter, nestling close to their great egg, lay deep in sleep. They look funny sleeping, don't they? With their heads thrown back and their mouths open, their teeth showing. They both have very strong teeth, especially Beaver, who must use them to cut down the twigs that he used to build the framework for the egg. Turn the page, and we'll get a look inside the egg, as though we could look right through the shell to find Fletcher, his eyes wide open, not sleeping much because he's a little bit concerned about the whole business. Inside the egg, feeling very homesick, Fletcher wondered if Alexandra was thinking of him. And then on the opposite page, we have a picture of Alexandra back in the farmhouse, where she lay awake under her red quilt. Tears fell on her pillow. How could she sleep with Fletcher gone, perhaps never to return? The clock struck 12 before she finally went off to sleep. Turn the page. At last it was morning, and on this page you can just tell that it's morning because there's a little light in the sky. The sun hasn't come up, but there's light enough to see by, and Beaver and Otter are hard at work. At the pond, the white surface of the water was broken by jumping frogs and leaping minnows. Otter and Beaver awoke and ambled down to the water's edge for a quick dip and breakfast. They didn't forget a few strawberries for Fletcher, who was discovering that the inside of an egg is a most unsatisfactory place to yawn and stretch, and we might add, to scratch himself. "Let's go," commanded Beaver. Now the animals started the last part of their plan. Very carefully they pushed, shoved, and rolled the egg until they reached a large clump of grass by the path that led to Alexandra's school. Inside the egg, Fletcher felt a bit bruised and very confused. Turn the page. And there we find the egg in its final resting place. The town began to wake up slowly, and the sounds of traffic drove Beaver and Otter back to the pond and the tall grasses. And there they are, running away fast before they will be seen. They shouted goodbye. Good luck, Fletch, and remember, no barking, just peeping. Beep, growled Fletcher, and then lay quiet inside the egg. And soon someone rode by to find the egg. It was the custodian on the way to open the school in the morning who first discovered the amazing egg. And he got very excited. If you'll turn the page, you'll see him. Very, very excited. He shouted to some nearby children, "It's an egg, the biggest one in the world. Call the science teacher." Soon a crowd of children gathered about, and their eyes were filled with wonder. "Where is its mother?" asked little Tommy. "Its mother would be as large as a house," said round-eyed Gabby, shaking her blonde hair. "Bigger," said Robert. Turn the page and we'll find out who else comes to see the egg. Well, there are a lot of people gathered around now, as you can see. The science teacher scurried up to the crowd with his friend, Professor Schnitzer from the university. The crowd became larger, and members of the school band, on their way for an early practice, gathered close. Now, those are the boys and girls all in uniform. They belong to the band, and they all have their instruments with them. The science teacher stood up on a park bench and shouted, "Don't touch it. It looks like a flat-billed prehistoric scratch-a-fratch. A priceless find." A respectful hush fell on the crowd. Turn the page. "Or perhaps it is the web-wooded, pickle-faced dinoflyer," cried the professor from the university. Fletcher huddled inside the egg, quivering with excitement as he waited for Alexandra. Suddenly he heard her name. The children were telling her about the egg. Fletcher now began to get ready for the big moment, but Alexandra was making funny noises. Alexandra was crying. She told them all that she didn't want to see a funny old egg. She was looking for lost Fletcher. In fact, the only thing in the world that she wanted was Fletcher. Turn the page and see what happens when Fletcher hears that. Then and there, Fletcher knew it was time to hatch. He pushed and stretched, and with a rising howl, he fairly exploded out of the egg. And there he is, rushing through the air, with fragments of egg scattering everywhere. Turn the page and you'll see the reunion between Fletcher and Alexandra. The crowd screamed and moved back. Fletcher shook himself and the mud flew. Feeling that something was expected of him, he turned to Alexandra. "Beep," he croaked, because he was told to peep, by the beaver and otter. Turn the page. And there are Alexandra and Fletcher hugging each other. Laughing and crying, Alexandra hugged him. The two men of science, who thought it was some prehistoric animal who was going to hatch out of the egg, looked at their shoes and felt a little foolish. "Strike up the band," said the principal, hoping that everyone had forgotten about his guess, that the mother of the egg was a giant hen from Mars. Indeed. The band played "Hurrah for the Red, White, and Blue." The principal, feeling called upon to bring the occasion to a close, faced the audience. He wiped his face with his handkerchief. "Only in America," he announced with great feeling, "could a hound dog hatch out of an egg." This seemed to please everyone. With much clapping and whistling, the crowd began to fall away. Turn the page, and you'll find Alexandra skipping along with Fletcher. Fletcher panted happily. Sometimes Alexandra had to stop to hug her dog, and Fletcher thought to himself, "You don't have to hatch to be loved. You don't have to be yellow and peep. You can be a great hound dog with brown spots and be the most important creature in a little girl's life." Even the butterflies are dancing along with them. Turn the page and you'll see Fletcher for a last time, when he gave himself a good shake, and the last of the dried mud on his back went flying. And what else went flying as he gave himself a great shake, Brian?
Brown spots.
Some of his brown spots even went flying because he shook himself so hard to get rid of all of the traces of that great egg and the idea of his hatching from the egg like a chick. If you turn the page, you'll see the ends of the book again, and in the moonlight, once again, Fletcher's friends, Ollie, the otter, and Billy the beaver, I guess those are their names, standing near the water while the great egg, broken apart now, is up at the top of a hill. And in the background, you can see the steeple and the roofs of the houses of the town. And so, to close the book and see once again on the cover, Otter, Beaver, and Fletcher, That is the end of the story, Brian. Hi, Brian. How about another story?
Yes, sir.
Well, not so loud. You'll run the level indicator needle right off the chart. And it's apparently picking up very well, so we can read another story tonight. But this time we'll read from a book that's from the library. So, well, if you make those noises, I won't bother doing it. You understand?
I love
All right. But remember this, that when we listen to this story on the tape in the future, you will not have the book to hold and watch the picture. So we'll have to describe everything very thoroughly tonight, so you can have as much as possible when you listen to the story in the future. And you want to hear first Mrs. Crumble and Fire Engine number 7, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If you'll pick up the book, you'll see that there's a picture of an old-fashioned fire engine on the cover. Now, that's not a new fire engine, you know. This is an old-fashioned fire engine. They don't use these anymore, but they're very pretty, aren't they? And who's sitting in the seat, in the driver's seat, Brian?
I guess, but I do know her name is Mrs. Crumble.
Well, now why don't you try to say it with a little, so we can hear it a little better. Now sit up and give me her name properly.
Crumble.
Mrs. Crumble, that's correct. You don't have to, well, at any rate, what's the number on the front of the engine, Brian?
A 7.
Number 7. Do you notice, Brian, that we're looking at the front of the engine on the front of the book, and if we turn the book around to see the back, we'll see the back of the engine, where all the hose is coiled up.
And there's another yellow 7.
Yes. The yellow 7 on a red fire engine. And there are ladders on the fire engine, hoses. If we open the book, we'll see a full-page picture of the fire engine from the side. And again, we see the hoses, and there's the great siren, the great searchlight, and the old-fashioned steering wheel. And there's Mrs. Crumble standing up near the front.
And the 7.
Yes, there are the numbers 7 again. And if I can manage to turn to the first page, I'll begin the story. Oh, here we are. Every Tuesday, little Mrs. Crumble worked in the firehouse. Often when the chief was not looking, she climbed up and polished the brass on engine number 7. Engine number 7 must have been one of her favorites. Do you think, Brian?
Yeah, because it's so dirty. Look at it.
Mm-hmm. She polished the brass until it looked like gold, and there she is, polishing the brass on the searchlight. If you're not careful, Mrs. Crumble, there won't be anything left of the brass, one fireman would say. Or, here comes Mrs. Crumble. She's certainly thorough when she gets a mop in her hands. Once in a while, Mrs. Crumble wished that someone would look at her work and say, "Well done, Mrs. Crumble." But they don't say that, do they, Brian? Well, they take her for granted, I guess. That's like taking Mommy for granted, isn't it? She's always there when we need her, so we don't pay much attention to her. Oh, look, here come Mother and Evan in to be kissed goodnight. Good night, Evan. You're being put on tape, Evan. I see you found his lovely. Good night. Well, you can go ahead and get a drink. His mother will get it for you, but I'm going to go ahead and read the story. Okay, now on this particular Tuesday morning, she stopped for a moment to admire engine number 7. Never was there a brighter, redder, more beautiful fire engine. And when that fire engine started for a fire, it roared like an elegant tiger. And there's another picture of famous number 7. Mrs. Crumble went into the firehouse kitchen and put a pot of coffee on the stove. It will be hot when the firemen want it, she said. And then she decided to go back to work. She looked at the floor and said, if ever a floor needed a good cleaning, it's this one. And one of the firemen said, look at her, she's sweeping up a dust storm. And there she is, sweeping up indeed a large cloud of dust. When the chief wasn't looking, Mrs. Crumble polished the brass on engine number 7. She had just climbed down when the chief came out of his office. There's a chimney sweep stuck in a chimney on Van Ness Avenue, he said. And 3 men jumped on the ladder truck, and away they went. Well, that's number 7, the ladder truck. And when they came back, the men and the chief went into the kitchen for coffee. Mrs. Crumble filled a pail with water. Work, 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 she said happily. The men came hurrying from the kitchen. Stay out of the chief's way, said one. He burned his hand on the coffee pot, and he's like a bear with a sore paw. Mrs. Crumble stayed out of the chief's way, and there's a picture of the chief who was very upset because he wanted a cup of coffee and reached for the coffee pot and it was very, very hot, and he burned his hand. And when she was leaving that night, the youngest fireman said, "Good night, Mrs. Crumble." That night at home, Mrs. Crumble thought about all the years she had worked in the firehouse. Almost 20 years it had been, and she had never been late for work, and she had always worked happily. But in all that time, no one had said, "Well done, Mrs. Crumble." They only said things like, "Stay away from her pail, it's worse than a broken fire hydrant," or, "Stand back if you don't want suds in your eye." And there's Mrs. Crumble. I guess this is at home, and she's peeling. Oh, what does it look like she's peeling? Apples or something? They're red. Apples, I guess. Maybe she's going to make an apple pie for the firemen. What do you think? Probably. Well, to go on. Before she went to work the following Tuesday, she picked up a red pot holder and put it in her pocket. And in the firehouse, she set the coffee pot on the stove as usual. And she laid the pot holder nearby. "With a nice thick pot holder, the chief won't burn himself again," she said. The chief called to his firemen. "Two cats can't get down from the courthouse roof," he said, "so let's go. Let's go to help." There went the ladder truck number 7 again. And there's a picture of the courthouse and the courthouse roof, and there are 2 kittens on the edge trying to get down. Mrs. Crumble went about her cleaning. "Woman's work is never done," she said happily. And then the truck was back again after they had rescued the cats. "Look at Mrs. Crumble," said a fireman. "She's been going like that for almost 20 years. 20 years of polishing brass makes brass too bright to look at," another said. And we'll turn the page, and it looks like, yes, it is. It's happened again. Just then the bells rang and the fire whistle blew, and all the firemen had to hurry into the truck to get ready to go to another fire. There they are, sliding down the pole, and one is coming in from the door, one is grabbing a horn through which he calls out orders. Mrs. Crumble backed out of the way. A fireman came down the pole from the bunk room above. The chief came running from the kitchen, and firemen came from everywhere. And there they went. Number 7 is off again. "There she goes," Mrs. Crumble said. "Engine number 7, roaring like an elegant tiger." Mrs. Crumble worked for a long time. "They have had time enough to put out a big fire," she said to herself. And when she said the word fire, she almost thought she smelled smoke. And then she was sure that she did smell smoke. "Fire! Fire!" she shouted. She looked into the kitchen, and there on the floor lay the pot holder, smoldering, red flames licking around the edges. Black smoke rose high. Mrs. Crumble reached for the coffee pot and poured the coffee on the floor and the burning pot holder. The fire hissed. It was out. Mrs. Crumble was still fanning smoke out of the room when engine number 7 came rolling back. "What's going on here?" the chief asked. "We had a fire," Mrs. Crumble said. "We had a fire, and not a fireman here to take care of it. I had to do it myself. Someone let the pot holder get in the fire when he reached for the coffee, and fire bells rang, and he dropped that burning pot holder right onto the floor." She looked straight at the chief. The chief looked embarrassed. "Well," he said, "strange things happen once in a while." After work, Mrs. Crumble waited around, hoping someone would say something about the firehouse fire. No one said a thing. Did you notice that, Brian? When she told them what happened, no one said a thing. No one told her how brave it was of her to put a fire out.
They did say it. "Well done, Miss Crumble." They didn't say that yet.
No, and that's what she's waiting for them to say, because, Brian, everyone who does a good job likes to be told that it was a good job, right?
I know that.
It's nice to be patted on the back, in other words, and have something nice said about you.
Yeah.
Well, the next week, when it was Tuesday morning again, Mrs. Crumble lay in bed. "Maybe I won't go to work today," she said. Why do you think she's thinking of not going to work, Brian?
She thinks that the fireman is going to get somebody else to take her place.
Well, do you think it's that, Brian, or do you think that she's just discouraged, and because they did not compliment her on doing such a nice job putting the fire out, that maybe she feels that they don't need her, and so she won't go because she thinks they don't need her anymore?
Yeah, that's what I said.
Oh, I see.
Said
Okay.
maybe they're going to take somebody else and
Oh, this is what she says next in the story. That's right. Maybe I'll let them find someone else to take my place because she didn't think that they appreciated her.
That's why I said it.
Well, then she thought about it. Supposing they really did find someone else to take her place, and what would the men in the firehouse do without her? And what would she do without fire engine number 7? You know how she likes to polish the brass.
I love that.
And here's a picture of her little house with a little chimney.
That's her house.
She ran out of the house and she ran down the street. She was just thanking her lucky star that no one knew she was late when the youngest fireman came from the kitchen. "You're late," he said. "I had to make the coffee, and the chief wants to see you." The chief looked at Mrs. Crumble. "Come with me," he said. "Oh, my," Mrs. Crumble thought. "He knows I'm late for work. Oh, what will happen now?" She followed him to a parked car. He opened the door and they climbed in. They rode until they came to the park. And there, what was in the park, Brian?
It's a 7.
Yes, what's it doing in the park? There's no fire in the park, is there?
No, they just had a parade.
Oh, yes.
Headed for a parade.
There was engine number 7 coming across the parade ground. The flag and the drum, the bugle. An American flag whipped out in the wind. There were firemen parading toward Mrs. Crumble. There were drums and there was music. The chief took a paper from his pocket. 20 years ago, Mrs. Crumble came to work for us in the firehouse. Oh, my, Mrs. Crumble thought. He is reading about me. He read on and on. They were honoring her, Mrs. Crumble, for 20 years of good work. You see, they were finally telling her, well done. There, then, on her coat was a badge, pinned there by the chief, every bit as big as the chief's own badge. He led her over to fire engine number 7. "You will lead the parade through town," and back to the firehouse. Then, in a whisper small enough for Mrs. Crumble, he said, "But for you, we might not have a fireplace to go back to." So Mrs. Crumble climbed up on engine number 7. The firemen waved their hats and shouted, and Mrs. Crumble, in turn, waved her handkerchief. Then she saw a spot of dust on the ladder, so she reached over and gave it a quick and loving polish. Because that's what she liked to do best, Brian. Keep that beautiful engine sparkling clean. Proudly she sat there on engine number 7, leading the parade through the streets. She listened to engine number 7, and it was purring like a happy tiger. And that's the end of the story. And there's a last picture showing engine number 7 with Mrs. Crumble and the chief in the driver's seat.
It's not chief.
Oh, where's the chief?
No.
Maybe he's beating the drum. Well, that's the end of the story, at any rate.
We'll listen to it.
Well, Brian, how would you like to have another story tonight? Which story would you like to hear tonight? Well, how about this one, Brian? Why don't you say... is this the one you want to hear?
Yes. I do.
All right, I believe you. And this, again, is a library book. And when you listen to this story, you won't have the book to look at, so we'll have to describe everything very, very carefully. And the title of this book is, I Want to Be a Pilot. And on the cover, there's a picture of a little boy, a little bigger than you, Brian. And he is saluting 2 men in uniform who are passing by, and they're obviously pilots because this scene is an airport, and behind the 3 of them, there are airplanes in a control tower.
Did you get the airplane the ball holding?
Well, yes, that's right. The little boy is holding a model, isn't he? It looks like a jet with wing pods. Well, this is the story then about Mike and Joe and their brothers. And Joe is the little boy, and Mike is Joe's big brother. And I guess they live by the airport, don't they, Brian? And they both like airplanes very, very much. And
he goes to work and he goes in the little airport school.
Yes, but it's not about airplanes. It's a regular school, just like your school. They call it the airport school, Brian, because it's built near the airport. It's located near the airport.
And he goes to airport school in the airport.
That's right. The little boy goes to regular school, just like you do. And the his bigger brother goes to a school for flying. And the story opens as they are setting out one morning. Goodbye, Mike. Goodbye, Joe. Mike is Joe's big brother. Joe is going to school. Mike is going to school too, but he goes to school at an airport. Mike goes to flying school. Well, Joe, of course, is the little boy, and he goes to a regular school that is located near the airport. Mike is learning about engines. He is learning about wind and weather too, and he is learning how to fly. But so far, he is still on the ground. In other words, you have to study a long time, Brian. And this is a picture of the classroom where Mike is. Not Joe's classroom, but Mike's classroom at the flying school. And what are they studying?
About airplanes and look.
There's a model, and there's a diagram and a chart, and there's a picture of the pistons in the engine. At last, one day, Mike does go up in a small airplane, and his teacher goes up with him. And
Where's Mike? Where's Mike?
Well, now, there are two brothers, right?
Right.
Now, Joe is the little boy, and Mike is the grown-up boy.
Where's Mike on that picture?
Oh, I see. Okay. Mike is right here, and this is the teacher. And they're both in the cockpit of a small plane, and they're getting ready to taxi down the runway.
They are ready.
And here are some instructions on how to fly, Brian. This is how you fly an airplane. If you turn the wheel right, the airplane goes right. If you turn the wheel left, the airplane goes left. And if you pull the wheel out, the nose goes up. Push the wheel in, and the nose goes down.
What makes it go straight?
Well, if you don't do anything to the wheel at all, you just hold it still, right in the middle.
Go straight.
Well, Mike learns his lessons well. Then one day he takes the little airplane up alone, not with his teacher. And then he flies over the countryside and over his smaller brother Joe, who is down there on the ground with his little dog and his model. They're waving up to Mike, who's up there in the plane alone.
And look.
And there's the airport tower in the distance, yes. Mike flies now almost every day, and he counts his hours in the air. One day he says, I have been flying for more than 1,000 hours. Now I want to work for a big airline. I want to fly a big airplane, a passenger airplane that carries people. And in the meantime, here's a picture of the two brothers making models together. Mike is teaching Joe, little boy, something about airplanes. Well, Mike goes to the airline office, and they find that he is well and strong, and his eyes are good, and he has his flying and radio papers already because he went to school. So, Mike is now going to go to the airline ground school. He has more to learn, much more to learn about flying a big airplane. He has more to learn about the radio and about engines. But he learns his lessons well, and at last he goes to work on a big airplane, a passenger airplane, where he is the co-pilot. He helps the pilot. Sometimes he flies the airplane. And many people help the pilot of a big airplane. Here's a picture of all the people who help the pilot. Who is, what are they doing here?
They just hit the wings and they're taking the motor.
Putting fuel in, checking the motor. And what are they doing over here?
That looks like just Puff the Magic Dragon.
Oh, I don't think so. Oh, the plane. I see. The plane is very much like Puff the Magic Dragon. That's right, a DC-3.
DC-3, that's the one you were riding on.
Oh, yes.
DC-3.
Well, here we are with Joe again, and Joe says, I want to be a pilot when I grow up. Learn all you can in school, says Mike. Go to high school and then go to college. I will, says Joe. You will probably fly a jet airplane when you grow up, says Mike.
Well, look at that.
Yes, that's a model of a big jet.
Wow, that's big.
Mike is a good co-pilot. He is a co-pilot for several years until he's finally made a full pilot. Now he is a captain, and we call him Captain Mike. Many people help him with his airplane. Captain Mike is almost ready to take off now. He and his co-pilot see that everything is all right, and the motors start humming. Flight 22, Flight 22, taxiway to runway 6, taxi to runway 6.
I'll do that.
All that comes over the... Just a second, I just did it. All that comes over the radio. You see, Mike is in the cockpit, and he is in constant communication with the radio tower because the radio tower must tell him when and where to take off. Flight 22, this is the tower. Flight 22, taxi to runway 6. Taxi to runway 6. Hi, Tower, this is Flight 22. Roger, over and out. So the airplane moves down the field. Slowly it turns and waits. Flight 22, all clear for takeoff. That's it, says Captain Mike. Let's go to New York. The airplane roars down the runway and soars into the sky. And look who's inside the airplane taking his first ride with his brother Captain Mike.
Joe.
Joe sits in his deep seat and smiles and eats his lunch because he is flying to New York with Captain Mike. That's right.
That's Mike's little boy.
No, this is Mike's younger brother.
Joe.
That's right. That's not his little boy, but that's his younger brother. Well, that's all for that story, Brian. Well, how would you like to practice some airport sounds, Brian? Let's see if we can imitate the roar of a jet airplane taking off. As it nears the runway, the captain of the airplane then calls to the tower for the weather and for taxi instructions. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
So we have to pretend that we're a tower, you see. And so the pilot picks up his microphone.
I'm the pilot.
All right, go ahead and call the tower, Brian.
Take off. And what do you say, Daddy?
Well, I don't say very much, Brian, because I didn't understand you.
I said,
You have to speak louder and clearer.
Tower. All clear for takeoff. Can take off yet?
Well, let's try it this way. Captain Mike might say something like this. Tower, or let's say it's Kennedy Airport. Kennedy Tower, this is Flight 22. Will you give me weather over Washington and taxi instructions? Over.
Contact.
Flight 22, this is Kennedy Tower. The weather is clear, visibility 18 miles, winds from the north-northeast at 11 knots. You are clear to taxi to runway 14. Use apron 7 to runway 14 and await further instructions. Over. Kennedy Tower, this is Captain Mike in Flight 22. Roger, I read your instructions and the weather.
That's me.
And then slowly, Captain Mike pushes or pulls the throttle and the jet engines start to whistle and roar. Well, those are the engines just getting started, Brian, so that the plane can move down the apron and over to the runway. Then when Captain Mike is ready to go, he calls the tower again for permission to take off. Something like this. Kennedy Tower, this is Flight 22. Have we permission to take off on runway 7? Flight 22, this is Kennedy Tower. You are clear to take off. Proceed. Over.
I'll make the jet.
And then the captain puts the throttles forward, and the great jet slowly gains momentum to speed down the runway and lift off into the sky. Welcome once again, Brian, to Story Time. Are you ready to hear another story?
Yeah.
Or perhaps for the first one for tonight. And once again, we'll read from a library book. So we'll have to be careful to describe everything in the book and all the pictures, because we don't have the book to look at as we're listening to the story. And what's the name of this story, Brian?
The Happy Lion.
The Happy Lion.
That's right.
On the cover, do you think that's a picture of a happy lion, Brian?
I say so.
It's a very long face, very long nose. In fact, you could slide down that nose, couldn't you? Looks like a slide. But he's smiling, and he has a little beard. And here he is with his tail straight up in the air, and he's sniffing a little bird, or else watching it eat. Well, there was once a very happy lion. His home was not the hot and dangerous plains of Africa, where hunters lie in wait with their guns, but a lovely French town with brown tile roofs and gray shutters. The happy lion had a house in the town zoo all for himself, with a large rock garden surrounded by a moat in the middle of a park with flower beds and a bandstand. What's a moat, Brian?
A moat is a bandstand right here.
Well, yes, it's a ditch, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a ditch, and they put water in there, and that keeps the people away from the lion, right?
Right.
And it keeps the lion from escaping, right?
Right.
Yes. In other words, we don't see very many moats these days, not very many ditches around houses, but there is around the lion house. And this house here, which leads just off the island, is for the lion to go into when it rains, and it's called Maison du Lion. That's the house of the lion in French. You know, in France they speak French, and this story is about a little French town and a little French boy. I guess it's a French lion. No, it was once an African lion. Well, early every morning, Francois, the keeper's son, stopped on his way to school to say bonjour, happy lion. Afternoons, Monsieur Dupont, the schoolmaster, stopped on his way home to say bonjour, happy lion. Evenings, Madame Pinzon, who knitted all day on the bench by the bandstand, never left without saying au revoir, happy lion, which is to say goodbye. You see, in French, bonjour is good morning, or good day, really. So you can say it all day long. You don't have to say good afternoon. You say the same thing, bonjour, which means good day. And when the Mrs. Pinzon says au revoir, she means goodbye, farewell. Well, on summer Sundays, the town band filed into the bandstand. Now, that's very close by, isn't it? It's close to the lion's pen, isn't it, Brian? The bandstand. Didn't you see that here? There's the bandstand. That's just a little ways away, right?
Right.
Yes. Okay. And the lion likes music, do you think?
It does.
Yes. The band went into the bandstand to play waltzes and polkas, and the happy lion closed his eyes to listen. He loved music. Everyone was his friend and came to say bonjour and offer meat and other tidbits. He was a happy lion. One morning, the happy lion found that his keeper had forgotten to close the door of his house. He said, I don't like that. Anyone may walk in. Oh, well, he added on second thought, maybe I will walk out myself and see my friends in town. It will be nice to return their visits. They're always coming to see me. I think they might like me to come to see them sometime. Do you think they will, Brian?
They'll be frightened.
They'll wonder what a lion is doing, walking around loose. They think lions ought to be in cages, but here's a perfectly happy, contented, very peaceful and harmless lion. So the happy lion walked out into the park and said, bonjour, my friends, mon ami, bonjour, mon ami, as the French say, you know. To the busy sparrows, bonjour, happy lion, answered the busy sparrows. And he said, bonjour, mon ami, to the quick red squirrel who sat on his tail and bit into a walnut. Bonjour, happy lion, said the red squirrel, hardly looking up. I mean, after all, it's not unusual to see a big, happy lion walking around the park, is it? The squirrel didn't think it was unusual, but someone else might. So when the happy lion went onto the cobblestone street where he met Monsieur Dupont just around the corner. Bonjour, he said, nodding in his polite lion way. Oh, answered Monsieur Dupont, and fainted onto the sidewalk. What a silly way to say bonjour, said the happy lion, and he padded along on his big soft paws. Bonjour, mesdames, the happy lion said farther down the street when he saw three ladies he had known at the zoo. Oh, cried the three ladies, and ran away as if an ogre or dragon were after them. I can't think, said the happy lion, what makes them do that? They are always so polite at the zoo. Do you know what makes them do that, Brian?
Because
They're afraid of him. Look what's happening here. Everybody's running. Bonjour, madame. The happy lion nodded again when he caught up with Madame Pinson near the grocery store. You know, Madame Pinson is the one who knits in the park and who says au revoir, happy lion. Oh la la, cried Madame Pinson, and threw her shopping bag full of vegetables right into the lion's face. Achoo! Sneezed the lion. People in this town are foolish, as I begin to see. Now the lion began to hear the joyous sounds of a military march, and he loves music, you know. He turned around the next corner, and there was the town band marching down the street between two lines of people. A-rat-a-ta-tum, a-rat-a-ta-ta, rat-a-ta-tum, tum-da-ta-ta-ta, boom, boom, a-rat-a-ta-tum, boom. Before the lion could even nod and say bonjour, the music became screams and yells. What a hubbub! Musicians and spectators tumbled into one another in their flight towards doorways and sidewalk cafes. Soon the street was empty and silent except for a little dog who kept barking at the happy lion. So the lion sat down and thought. I suppose, he said, this must be the way people behave when they are not at the zoo. Then he got up and went on with his stroll in search of a friend who would not faint or scream or run away. Will he find one, Brian? But the only people he saw were pointing at him from the highest windows and balconies. Now, what was this new noise the lion heard? Toot, 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 went that noise. Toot, 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 and it grew more and more noisy. It may be the wind, said the lion, unless it is the monkeys from the zoo, all of them taking a stroll. All of a sudden, a big red fire engine burst out of a side street and came to a stop not too far from the lion. Then a big truck came backing up from the other side of him with its back door wide open. The lion just sat down very quietly, for he did not want to miss what was going to happen, whatever it was. The firemen got off the engine and advanced very, very slowly toward the lion, pulling their big fire hose along. Very slowly they came closer and closer, and the fire hose crawled on like a long snake, longer and longer. Suddenly, behind the lion, a little voice cried, Bonjour, happy lion. It was Francois, the keeper's son, on his way home from school. He had seen the lion and had come running to him. The happy lion was so very happy to meet a good friend who did not run and who said bonjour. He was so happy that he forgot all about the firemen. And he never found out what they were going to do because Francois put his hand on the lion's great mane and said, Let's walk back to the park together. What is the lion's mane?
That's his mane.
Yeah, all the hair in back of his head. Yeah, on top of his head and back of his head. Yes, let's walk back together, purred the happy lion. Purr, 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 purr. So Francois and the happy lion walked back to the zoo. The firemen followed behind in the fire engine, and the people on the balconies and the high windows shouted at last, now not afraid, Bonjour, happy lion. From then on, the happy lion got the best tidbits the town saved for him. But if you opened his door, he would not wish to go out visiting again. He was much happier to sit in his rock garden, while on the other side of the moat, Monsieur Dupont, Madame Pinson, and all his old friends came again like polite and sensible people to say bonjour, au revoir, happy lion. But he was happiest when he saw Francois walk through the park every afternoon on his way home from school. Then he swished his tail for joy, for Francois remained always his dearest friend. That wasn't a very good lion roar, was it? No, it's very hard to roar like a lion, and really only lions can do it very well, so we better leave it to them. And that's the end of another story, Brian.
Thank you.